Welcome back to Theosophy and Beyond, where we venture into the depths of consciousness to retrieve wisdom from the most unexpected sources. I'm your host, Zero Hakathos, and today we're exploring a profound dream teaching received from Lamashtu, an ancient Mesopotamian force often misunderstood and demonized by later patriarchal traditions. Before we dive in, it's crucial to understand how this revelation came about. This wasn't a random dream or nightmare, but a deliberate evocation, a conscious request for communication with this ancient force. The approach taken was one of respect rather than fear, seeking to understand Lamashtu's place within creation rather than approaching her as an enemy or demon. What emerged through two connected dream sequences is a devastating critique of modern society's failures, wrapped in symbols that reveal how we've abandoned the sacred feminine principles that once protected life itself. Today, we'll unpack these visions and explore how Lamashtu's teachings applies to our current spiritual and social crisis. The first vision opens in a thrift store, already a potent symbol. Thrift stores are repositories of discarded objects, things that once had value and purpose, but have been cast off, forgotten, deemed no longer useful by their original owners. This is where Lamashtu chooses to reveal her first teaching, in a place of abandoned meaning. The dreamer has been sent by his wife to purchase something specific, and by the dreamer, I'm referring to myself, but immediately becomes distracted and forgets his purpose. This forgetting isn't accidental. It represents how easily we lose sight of our genuine spiritual missions when confronted with the spectacle of modern culture. Enter the Meg Thee Stallion figure, a representation of contemporary celebrity culture, female sexuality commodified and performed for public consumption. She's acting a fool with her friends, creating a scene that draws attention away from authentic purpose. The smell of marijuana adds another layer, the dulling of consciousness that so often accompanies this kind of performative lifestyle. But here's what's crucial. The dreamer moves closer to this spectacle, drawn in despite having lost his original purpose. This represents how our culture's obsession with celebrity, with surface-level entertainment, with the commodification of sexuality pulls us away from our spiritual missions. We become voyeurs to meaningless drama instead of participants in meaningful work. Yet these figures don't even notice the dreamer's presence. This is perhaps the most telling detail. The modern world's distractions are ultimately hollow. They don't acknowledge us, don't truly see us, don't offer genuine connection. They're simply performing their roles in a cultural theater that leaves observers invisible and unfulfilled. Then comes the heartbreaking centerpiece of the vision. A wrinkly newborn baby being protectively spooned by a dog, but it's the baby himself who looks at the rapper woman as if he wants to kill her. This is extraordinary. The newborn, fresh from the source, still carrying the wisdom of the unborn state, immediately recognizes the threat that this commodified, performative sexuality poses to his very existence. But when the dreamer, excited by the prospect of holding a baby, rips the infant from the dog's protective embrace, we encounter one of the most devastating prophecies in modern dream literature. The baby speaks. "Hey, my name is Daryl, white guy Daryl. I'm going to grow up stupid and alone. I'm screwed." This isn't just any baby. This is pure innocence being born into a culture that has lost its way. White guy Daryl, where white represents the color of purity and innocence itself, shows us a soul entering the world in a state of spiritual cleanliness, yet already prophesying his own corruption. The baby's prophecy is brutal in its honesty. He will grow up stupid and alone. Stupid, not because of lack of intelligence, but because he'll be raised in a culture that prioritizes entertainment over wisdom, consumption over creation, performance over authenticity. The very environment that should nurture his growth symbolized by the thrift store of discarded meanings, offers only distraction and spiritual poverty. Alone. Despite being surrounded by social media connections, despite the constant noise of digital culture, despite the illusion of community, he will be alone because genuine connection requires authentic purpose. And he's being born into a world where authentic purpose is forgotten the moment we encounter the next shiny distraction. I'm screwed. The raw honesty of innocent wisdom recognizing the trap it's being born into. This isn't despair speaking, it's prophetic truth. The current cultural trajectory offers no genuine path to masculine fulfillment, no meaningful role for the masculine principle to play in the sacred work of existence. Between dreams, Lamashtu offers a crucial revelation. She has no gender. She's not the female demon of patriarchal propaganda, but something far more fundamental. A force, an influencing idea, a spirit that transcends the limitations of physical form. This is revolutionary understanding. For millennia, Lamashtu has been portrayed as a specifically female threat, a demoness who endangers children and mothers, but her true revelation shows this to be projection and misunderstanding. She is the force that exposes what genuinely threatens new life. Not feminine power, but the absence of authentic, sacred feminine principles in our culture. When she appears without gender, she reveals herself as pure archetypal energy, the principle that challenges systems and structures that fail to protect and nurture life. She is the force that says no to cultures that abandon their children to spiritual poverty, that allow the masculine principle to grow up stupid and alone. This genderless revelation also suggests that our current gender wars, the battles between masculine and feminine, the confusion about identity and role, miss the deeper point. The real issue isn't gender conflict, but the absence of sacred principles altogether. When culture loses connection to the sacred, both masculine and feminine expressions become distorted and destructive. The second dream presents an even more potent symbol, a hollowed-out female goat causing havoc at a gas station by constantly crying out. The goat, traditionally associated with earth energy, fertility, and life force, has been completely gutted. She has no organs, yet she's still animated, still moving, still making noise. This is perhaps the most accurate symbol of modern femininity that could be imagined. The sacred feminine has been hollowed out, stripped of its essential organs, its life-giving power, its connection to natural cycles and genuine fertility, yet it continues to move through our culture, creating havoc, crying out in distress. The gas station setting is perfect, a place of transit or filling up with fuel for the journey, but ultimately temporary and commercial. This is where the hollowed feminine appears, in the spaces of consumption and transaction rather than in temples or sacred groves. Her constant crying represents the anguish of the sacred feminine trying to express itself in a culture that has removed its essential nature. She's not evil or destructive by choice. She's in pain, hollowed out and yet somehow still alive, still seeking connection, still trying to fulfill her purpose despite being systematically emptied of the very qualities that made that purpose possible. The havoc she causes isn't malicious. It's the natural result of a life force that has been stripped of its ability to create and nurture. When the sacred feminine is commodified, performed, and drained of authentic power, it becomes a source of chaos rather than harmony. But then comes the solution, simple, profound, and accessible to anyone willing to apply it. When the dreamer approaches the hollowed goat, looks into her eyes, and pays attention to her, she immediately calms down and lies down peacefully. This is Lamashtu's practical teaching for our time. The healing of the hollowed sacred requires genuine attention, not the kind of attention our culture gives to celebrity spectacle or social media performance, but real attention. Eye-to-eye contact, presence, recognition of the being behind the distress. The goat doesn't need to be exorcised or destroyed. She needs to be seen, acknowledged, understood. She needs someone to recognize that her havoc causing isn't inherently evil, but is the cry of something sacred that has been systematically emptied and is desperately seeking restoration. This applies directly to our current cultural crisis, the havoc we see in gender relations, in the confusion around masculine and feminine roles, in the crisis of meaning among young people. Much of this isn't evil that needs to be fought, but distress that needs to be recognized and addressed with genuine attention and care. When we approach the hallowed sacred with presence rather than fear, with curiosity rather than judgment, with genuine desire to understand rather than simply to control or condemn, we discover that healing is possible. The agitated energy settles. The crying stops. Peace becomes available. So how do we apply Lamashtu's teaching in our daily lives? How do we become healers of the hallowed sacred in our families, communities, and cultures? First, we must learn to recognize when we're in the thrift store of forgotten purposes. When we find ourselves distracted by cultural spectacle, drawn away from our authentic missions by the performance of others, we need to remember why we came and return to our genuine work. Second, we must develop the courage to hear prophecies like innocent Darryl's without defensiveness or despair. Our culture is producing generations of people who will grow up stupid and alone unless we create alternative pathways, alternative models, alternative communities that prioritize wisdom over entertainment and authentic connection over digital noise. Third, we must learn to approach the hollow sacred, whether in ourselves or others, with the medicine of genuine attention. When we encounter people of situations that seem to be causing havoc, we can ask, what has been emptied here? What essential nature has been stripped away? What crying need is being expressed through apparent chaos? Finally, we must understand that forces like Lamashtu aren't demons to be feared, but teachers to be honored. The uncomfortable visions, the challenging dreams, the difficult truth, these come not to destroy us, but to show us what needs healing, what needs attention, what needs restoration. Lamashtu's teaching reveals her true nature, not the child-killing demon of patriarchal propaganda, but the guardian force that exposes what genuinely threatens new life. She shows us the thrift store culture that makes us forget our purposes, the celebrity spectacle that hollows out authentic expression, the gas station spirituality that leaves us running on empty. But she also shows us the solution, genuine attention, eye-to-eye presence, the courage to see what has been emptied and offer it the recognition it needs to heal. The wrinkly newborn speaking his harsh prophecy, the hollowed goat crying in distress. These aren't enemies, but patients, spirits in need of the medicine that only conscious, caring attention can provide. In our time of cultural crisis, of gender confusion, of spiritual emptiness masquerading as entertainment, Lamashtu's teachings offer a path forward. Approach the hollow sacred with not fear, but with presence. Not with judgment, but with genuine curiosity about what needs to be restored. The gas station goat lies down peacefully when someone finally pays attention. The question for each of us is, are we willing to be that someone? Are we willing to look into the eyes of the hallowed sacred and offer it the recognition that begins all healing? Thank you for joining me in exploring these challenging but essential teachings from Lamashtu. I encourage you to pay attention to the hallowed sacred in your own life and community, to approach distress with curiosity rather than fear, and to remember that the forces we've been taught to fear often carry the very medicine we most need. Until next time, keep your eyes open, your attention genuine, and remember, sometimes the most important healing happens when we simply show up and pay attention.